soon to be triple demon. I was Juliet's student twice, once in the undergrad class of 2013 grad.
Yeah.
I got my MBA.
So long ago.
I got my MBA from DePaul in 2016, and I'm about halfway through the master's grad program.
Oh, that's great.
Great.
Well, thank you guys for being here. I might even have you reintroduce yourselves as people hop on, but I will share my screen. Welcome everybody. I know people are kind of rolling in, so I'll just get set up, and I'm recording, so that is great. Okay.
And I want to say hello to Joanna from SPJ.
Hi, yes, sorry, I just got out of class.
Oh,
Nice to see everybody.
good. We were just getting warmed up here.
Okay, I see more people are coming. Juliet, should I give it like a minute or so?
Maybe let's give it about 1 minute, because a lot of times people just come right at this last second and then we can go. So.
Hi, Maddie. Maddie's going to be live tweeting for us.
Hi, I'm the social media coordinator for SPJ.
Great, thank you.
I wish Zoom had like elevator music like built in or something.
Well, it quieted down, so maybe we can, I never know,
That'd be cool if you could like link your Spotify playlist.
Oh, and then SPJ, Mckay, is the Society of Professional Journalists. So we're doing like a little co-sponsored event tonight.
Okay. Cool. Very cool.
And I will introduce them as well. So I don't know, maybe I can just get started and whoever pops on, that's totally fine because I know people have classes and whatnot. So welcome everybody. This is DePaul PRSSA. Hopefully you're in the right place. And tonight it's official. We're doing public affairs, PR, and communication. So I believe this is our second meeting of spring quarter, which is crazy. But I also wanted to introduce our co-sponsor for tonight, which is our Society of Professional Journalists. And I will let Joanna kind of take it away and give her spiel of what SPJ is all about.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm so excited to be here. For everyone that doesn't know me, my name is Joanna Talabani. I'm the president of SPJ at the DePaul chapter. And, I've been really looking forward to this event in talking with Natalie and Juliet and kind of trying to plan this. One thing that, all of our events have focused strictly on journalism, but we're both in the School of Communication, and just in talking more, like we've realized how much our fields intersect, and like some of our panelists here today, I'm sure we'll get into, have worked in both fields. Either way, there's definitely a lot of intersectionality, and I'm really excited to discuss that. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you everybody for being here. And yeah.
And then I wanted to briefly introduce our executive board. So I'm Natalie, the president, and then we also have our executive VP, Lauren, and then Juliet, our advisor. And then Bree, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Shabrina Minton, and I'm the VP of Professional Development.
I am Niffer Honeycutt. I am the VP of Creative.
And then we have Christina, who's the VP of Social Media, Rebecca, our VP of Special Events. I don't believe Taylor is with us currently, but she's our VP of Hospitality. And then Tommy, who's our VP of Community Outreach. But then I wanted to also introduce our incoming DePaul PRSSA Executive Board. So Taylor will be our incoming president in the fall. And Niffer, I'll just go along. She'll be our incoming VP of Digital. Christina will be our incoming VP of membership. Then Melania, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm the incoming VP of Professional Development.
Hey, I'm Pavitra. I'll be the incoming VP of Social.
Hey, I'm Holly. I'll be the incoming VP of Events.
Hi everyone, I'm Giselle. I'll be the incoming VP of Communication.
So that's our huge board. And just one announcement, we do have a sale going on for graduating seniors. Dues are now 25% off through the month of May. So for any of you who are not currently a dues paying member, that's just a little perk right now. And then we also have scholarships. So for all of our dues paying members, scholarships are out and applications are going to be due by May 31st. They have a ton of different ones on their website. So you can also contact Juliet if you have any more questions regarding those. Okay, and one last thing, if you aren't connected with us already, we have a Slack channel, which is just an immediate communication tool that we use for announcements and events and just direct messaging each other and whatnot. So just make sure that you're on Slack if you aren't already. But yeah, without further ado, I wanted to get into our panel and our great panelists that we have tonight. And if you guys want to reintroduce yourselves again, we would love to hear, what work you're doing right now, a little bit about how you got started. So if Luis, you want to kick us off, that'd be great.
Hey, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Luis Agostini. I am the Assistant Director of Communications for the Chicago Police Department. Been with CPD for about 2.5 years, and my focus has been primarily on police reform and consent decree. So internal, external communication around the consent decree and reform, which is very much needed, not just here in Chicago, but throughout the country, and working with a variety of stakeholders, whether it's the city council members, the public, our community partners, and even internally, our own rank and file. So been doing that since October 2018. Prior to that, I was at about 5.5 years on the agency sector. So spent time at Edelman, at Golan, even at the boutique side on agency H5. And prior to that, I served 12 years in the United States Marine Corps, where I served in the public affairs field. So was a military journalist. I did some public affairs work, and I am a double demon. I class of 2013 Pratt, and got my MBA in marketing, brand and product management in 2016, and about halfway through the graduate Pratt program. So very happy to be a part of this community and helping out how I can.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Eleni Demertzis, and I'm currently the Deputy Chief of Communications for the Illinois House Republican Caucus. So to kind of summarize what that means, currently the Illinois House of Representatives has 45 members of the Republican Caucus. And so my job, in addition to being the spokesperson for the House Minority Leader, who's Jim Durkin, as well as the other 44 members in our caucus, just basically doing all the media strategy around our day-to-day operations. So if any of you are familiar with politics, you'd know that May is the busy month for session. We have until May 31st to pass a state budget and any other important bills that might get through. So right now is our go time. And then the other, usually it's from January to May, and then June to basically October is kind of like a break time. But our members vary from across the state. So I have some members that you can imagine are from Southern Illinois and ultra conservative. And then I have other members from the northern suburbs that are pretty moderate. So it's a multifaceted approach of making sure we're messaging appropriately on all levels for every one of our members. All over different levels of government. The only level I don't think I've worked in is state government, or I'm sorry, city government. So I worked for Bruce Rauner, Senator Mark Kirk, Tom Dart, the Cook County Sheriff, and also the former House Republican leader, Tom Cross. Prior to all of that, I graduated from DePaul as a journalism major and initially started out as a newspaper reporter. Unfortunately, at the time, I basically newspaper and print journalism was on the outs, and I was looking to transition into a different field. And since I was covering state government, that's kind of how I fell into the world of public affairs. So that's where I'm at, and happy to talk more about it with you guys.
Okay, my name is Mckay Murphy. I'm actually a pretty recent DePaul graduate, and I am currently the Community Relations Coordinator for Alderman Michelle Smith and a legislative aide on the Committee for Ethics and Government Oversight. So I just graduated about 2 years ago, and I actually came into DePaul as a journalism major, which lasted about 5 minutes. They say it's easier to change your major at DePaul and gosh, I can't remember what the system is called, than changing your email. It's very simple. So I switched from journalism to education to history until I landed on political science, which actually worked out pretty well for me. I first got started with Alderman Smith about 5 years ago when she came into one of my political science classes and made a pitch about getting interns to come work in her office. And I hadn't had an internship at that point, so I thought it was a good opportunity. And lo and behold, I got a paid internship with her office. I took a little break. I came back part-time. And throughout that whole time, I had opportunities to work on things like PR and social media, as well as infrastructure and zoning and community outreach and all of that stuff that you get to do when you work in a local government. And then when 2019 came around, I actually moved over to her campaign for a while and got a chance to experience the political campaign side of public affairs, which is far more riddled with anxiety and a time crunch and all those wonderful things. So I've had a little bit of experience doing some of everything, which you'll find if you work in the local government area. You'll get a lot of those different opportunities to find out what you like best and work in. Currently, as Community Relations Coordinator, I get to work with community organizations, planning special events and figuring out what best works for them to support the decisions that are being made on their behalf on the Chicago City Council. For the Committee on Ethics and Government Oversight, it was actually first started in 2019 under Mayor Lightfoot. So we have been fighting the uphill battle for ethics reform on the Chicago City Council, which is not always the, for lack of a better term, sexiest kind of policy to throw around. So really selling that as something that is good government is something that's a big part of our jobs as public servants on that committee. Hopefully I can answer any questions that you guys have and experiences as a recent graduate and somebody who works in public affairs.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here and introducing yourselves. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can all see everyone's lovely faces. So the way that it's going to work, we'll have about, I want to say like 30 minutes for some questions that Joanna and I have created for you guys, and then we'll allow for about 15 minutes Q&A. So if any of you are having questions, feel free to put them in the chat and, be respectful. They're all coming from different areas of government and whatnot. And so with that said, I would love to start us off with just a basic question. You all kind of touched on this before, but how did you get started with public affairs, or in what ways were your passions kind of aligned with this industry? I would love to know how each of you kind of got to where you are today.
I can start. So I kind of got started in high school. I actually did canvassing for Senator Chris Nybo, who was in the Senate Republican Caucus. At that time, he was actually a state rep, so in the House Republican Caucus. And that's kind of where I started really enjoying politics and figuring out that that was something that I wanted to go into. As I said, I didn't really get started working in local government until I got to DePaul. And I think really what has been best for me is that both timing and opportunity lined up really well with my passions. So She was up for re-election when I was just about to graduate. She won re-election and had money to hire more staffers on, so I was able to get that opportunity. But really what I like most about working in local government and public affairs is the ability to interact with people and see change happening on a very minute scale. Direct change in somebody's life can be really powerful, and it has the possibility of really making people happy and believing in government, as we've seen over the past few months with the pandemic and things like that. But on the other side, it can also make people very angry too. So you get the wild extremes. It's never boring, and I think that's what I like most about it.
So I was nodding because when you interned for Representative Nybo, I was working on House Republican staff at that time. And that was the first time that I got involved or got officially involved in politics. How I got into the public affairs world was actually when I was at DePaul, I did a ton of internships, and I'll touch on this later because I wrote it down for some of the questions you guys had, that really internships are the way to go if you're trying to figure out what you like, what you don't like. It's, you know, I know education is great, but that hands-on experience is really going to tell you what is going to, you know, make it for you and what you're really going to enjoy doing. So when I was at DePaul, I did probably like 5 internships. And one of those internships was the DePaul documentary project with Carol Marine and Don Mosley, which I believe now has become a full-blown course. But at the time, they had this little office in one of the old Lincoln Park campus buildings. And I remember my advisor saying, well, why don't you go downstairs and see if Carol Marine needs an intern? And I was like, what? And so I go down in like my pajamas basically, and there's Carol Marine and Don Mosley like sitting in this closet of an office on the DePaul campus. And they're like, hey, do you want to intern? And I was like, yeah. And so in addition to obviously interning for 2 great journalists, it was the perfect time because when that was happening, basically Rod Blagojevich was about to get indicted. So we were doing a ton of research and planning for that to happen. Barack Obama got elected as president the first time. And so really there was so much going on in the Illinois political world. And I'll just be honest, prior to that, I didn't know anything about politics. I was like, what is a state rep? What's the difference between a state rep and a US rep? And that's really where I just learned anything and everything. And also just really how broken the system is here in Illinois, as I'm sure you've all seen throughout the years. So that's actually how I first got involved in politics and getting to know public affairs, government, how that all works. And then when I graduated, like I mentioned earlier, I went into print journalism, but that was basically dying out at the time. And because I was covering state government in Representative Nybo's area and other representatives in that area, they're like, hey, why don't you try this out and see what you think? And that's basically how I ended up here.
So I'll wrap it up here. So my journey toward public affairs is not a straight line. As I mentioned, I enlisted in the Marine Corps back in 2000. It was 1 year. I'm from New York originally, so I attended a state college in New York. Did 1 year at the time, wasn't really for me, so I enlisted in the Marine Corps. The job field that I had selected was called it's public affairs. So really it was more, it's a hybrid of military journalism, community relations, media relations, just a hybrid of every kind of external engagement you could think of. So I did that for 12 years. I was stationed in San Diego, Hawaii, and once here in Chicago. So not, really tough, tough places, right? I did deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I had the opportunity to just engage a lot of different kinds of folks from, again, congressmen who would come in country and take tours to national, international media. So did that for 12 years. At the 12-year mark, I decided I had enough fun. So wanted to transition back to the private to civilian life. So moved to Chicago, where my wife is from. And I knew I was between journalism, and because that's kind of what I did for 12 years, a lot of journalism, whether it was writing photography myself, even if it was brand journalism in a sense, or overseeing journalists in, in the Marine Corps. So it was between journalism and PR. I was growing a family, so I knew PR would pay more bills than journalism would. So I went that route, went to DePaul. And from there, again, I just in the Pratt program, and I kind of just networked, really strong networking my way through. I didn't know anybody in Chicago, networked my way into a very junior spot at Elman, their media relations specialty practice. Did that for about 4.5 years, and I mean, pitching, writing pitches, learning strategy, learning how everything comes together with social media. So, I mean, working on accounts that involve diapers to financial communications to personal wealth to elephant conservation. So, like, just being a jack of all trades. Went on to a smaller boutique that focused on hospitality and local hospitality management. From there, spent about a year there. From there, went on to Golan to work on the McDonald's account. So again, like the other folks mentioned, just, learning what you like, and like, Ellen mentioned, variety of internships, trying different things. First couple of years, you don't know what you like yet. You may, be more into consumer packaged goods or that kind of field, or something like government and politics. So I tried a lot throughout my career. Ultimately, I was driven for myself, driven towards something of purpose again. So an opportunity presented itself to work with the Chicago Police Department on the consent decree on police reform. This was late 2018. The consent decree was just about to become effective, maybe 2 years fresh from the Laquan McDonald shooting and the aftermath, and just a major overhaul of how, policing would be carried out in Chicago. So I thought, for me, that was a blessing, returning to my roots where in the Marine Corps, where I served a larger purpose, and I've been here ever since. And in my current role, just working, as I mentioned, with a variety of stakeholders, media, community members, aldermen, city council members. So it's been the one professional opportunity where I've been able to harness everything together.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like it kind of goes on to my next question, which is, for those of us who might not know exactly what niche of PR, communications, or even politics, political science for that matter, what might you suggest students do in order to kind of find what drives their purpose and what they're passionate about? Because I know public affairs is such a purpose-driven industry, whether it be a course or specific internships. I mean, it sounds like you all have very different paths and you kind of took opportunities that came at you. But for students who are like, I have no idea what I want to be doing, I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I would personally say just do as many internships as you can. I know that it's hard because some of you are, like when I did it, I was school full time and I made my schedule Tuesdays and Thursdays, basically from like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then the rest of the days I would be interning somewhere and also working part-time, just to get as much experience as possible, because you'll do some things and they all don't have to be consistent. For example, like I did like a PR type internship at a museum and I was like, okay, cool. Kind of liked it, but it didn't do it for me. Then I was an intern at the Chicago Tribune. Again, another super cool internship. And it was actually cool because when I was there was when digital journalism was new and everyone there was like, how do I use Facebook? And so I had just learned. And so I'm like, here, let me show everybody how to use Facebook. So that was like cool to be a part of that. And then obviously, like I mentioned, the Carroll Marine internship that, had I not done that, I probably wouldn't really be interested in politics because I wouldn't know much about it or really get into the weeds about it. And so I think that all I could say is, look around. A lot of people, especially now, are more than willing to hire interns to help out in an office, and not just political and campaign stuff, which we're always looking for people if anyone's interested, but, any government offices, any state agencies, all these places are always looking for people help out, and you can see if what they do is your passion. And then if you like it, great, and you can continue on, or you can be like, this is definitely not for me, and move on before you take a job in that field that is going to make your life hell. So that's all I would say.
I would say, some of you, some folks may know what their passions are, right? You may already know you want to get into maybe multicultural communications. You want to work in that space. You may already know you want to be involved with politics or government, or you really, really want to work at an agency, or work on, crisis and things like that. I would imagine most folks still are not sure yet which path is best for them. So as I'm sure my peers here would say, try everything. It's like throwing darts at a wall and see what sticks, right? Just really try everything. I think the combination of your experiences, of your professional growth, will shape you on, throughout the trajectory of your career. So everything will end up shaping you. And for me, my experience working on McDonald's, on Olive Garden, on Schwab, and all these different accounts shape and help what I do today at CPD. Just understanding how to communicate with, again, different audiences, and knowing the different communications channels, how to segment, how to have a channel strategy. So all that shapes, how I work today and how I function in comms. So really, unless you already know for sure what you want to work in, if you do, then I would say stake out the agencies that or the organizations that specialize in that practice or in that field. Or, as I mentioned, the city of Chicago careers page often posts opportunities for internships, or walk-ins, like these folks here, walk into your local alderperson's office, and see if there are any opportunities. And there may be that are not listed. So I would just say, try everything, network. A lot of these opportunities, especially unfortunately, unfortunately, in politics and government, it's based on very strong networking as well.
Yes, our office is hiring interns at all times, so you're welcome to reach out to me after this. I would also say you can be hyper-focused at times, especially with PR and advertising with big firms, and getting into a big firm and adding that to your resume. But I think there is a lot to offer from working in a smaller organization, because the amount of opportunities that are going to come your way, and the different challenges that you can approach in a smaller organization like a non-for-profit or a local government office, can be really beneficial in figuring out what you'd like to do with your life, and how those skills can best be used if you do want to move to a bigger firm like Leo Burnett or one of those. So don't shy away from something just because it's a little bit smaller and it may not be as flashy on your resume. It's always good to get as many experiences in a broad-based areas as you can, because you'll never be sure what you're going to learn from those different things.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your experiences and just giving advice in that respect. And I think we're all kind of wanting to know, because you are all from different levels of government, what does a typical public affairs day look like for you? Are you, especially now that we're all remote, like we would love to know what your communication is on the day-to-day, and who you're trying to contact, or what specific campaigns you're currently working on. I think we would all love to hear how you've adapted during this time as well.
There is no typical day in the Chicago Police Department, unfortunately, and we deal with that. So just typical day, just practically first thing in the morning, coming off, just having an eye on the news cycle, especially on local news, just, seeing what's from, 6 to 9 a.m., what local media is reporting on, and that will dictate the rest of the day. It's almost just ensuring that, you're responding to the media queries often. First thing in the morning, 4 or 5 a.m., they're emailing our offices just asking about certain things so they can get ready for their news broadcasts and their coverage throughout the day. So focusing on, public safety, crime, our efforts, and helping prevent crime, solve crime throughout the day, responding to, providing updates on ongoing cases throughout the entire day. On the more strategic side, as I mentioned, on the consent decree side, we work, the consent decree itself overseeing the consent decree publishes a report assessing CPD and the city's compliance with the consent decree. So we're working toward a strategy of highlighting different policies that we're seeking community input on. We often work with our counterparts and our colleagues in the city council to ensure their constituents are aware of these opportunities to weigh in on policy. So just working and keeping those channels open. And one campaign that we're specifically working on, actually working with Natalie and her class on, is a public awareness campaign that's mandated by the consent decree. So this campaign has very specific, and it covers 3 parts. One is to educate the public on CPD policies that deal with interactions with the public. So for example, use of force, body worn cameras, taser use, and all kinds of other policies. Also, the public's rights, if you're ever stopped, interrogated, or arrested, and also how to file a complaint against a CPD or a CPD member. So for 2020, we partnered with, we entered into a marketing partnership with the Chicago Sun-Times, along with Metropolitan Family Services, and we launched a purely social campaign where it was Ask CPD. So we engaged the youth, and we had youth, we gave them defined parameters, but we did not filter their questions at all. We said, ask all, under those 3 buckets, send us the questions you would love to see highlighted. And it involved from, marijuana use, resisting arrest, or your rights if you believe you're falsely arrested, things like that. And it turned out well, and I found that satisfying because that was my piece and my baby of the consent decree, something that I was able to own. And last month, the monitor found CPD and compliance with that section of the consent decree. So I, looking back, I was able just to take a step back and see I actually had impact. I impacted change throughout the Chicago Police Department and being compliant with our journey toward reform. So again, now working with Natalie and this class here for the 2021 campaign. So soliciting, again, one thing the monitor values is community input, especially from the younger folks. So that's one campaign that we're working on for this year.
Wow, I don't know if I'm going to be able to top that. And that's great. Congratulations. Because I remember at the sheriff's office, the consent decree was so difficult to work around and manage. So that's amazing. So our days vary. So I'll give you today, for example, we woke up this morning and got an alert from Politico that said that the census, that some preliminary census data was coming out today, which is a huge, huge, huge deal. For people who don't know, it's a map year. It happens every 10 years, and it means this is when politicians technically usually draw the maps in Illinois. And so for decades, we've seen maps that have been unfair and drawn to favor certain legislators and representatives in order to keep them in office. And so because of everything that's happened with COVID, the census had said, hey, guess what? We're not going to have data for, I think the initial deadline, I think they're saying September or October. And we're just like, hey, how are we supposed to draw the lines? We have the deadline by June 30th. So we had a surprise this morning that they said, hey, we're going to release some preliminary data today. That means that at 8 a.m., I'm throwing together a Zoom press conference for 3 p.m. today, because that was at 2 p.m. was when the census was going to announce the information, which was that Illinois will be losing 1 congressional seat this next cycle, which we assumed, but everyone was thinking we'd lose at least 2. We were one of 3 states that lost population, which is really depressing when you think about it, because Illinois is one of the largest and best states in the country. So redistricting and maps has been our big issue. So literally 8 a.m., we're throwing together a Zoom press conference, getting our members ready. And then at 2, we're watching the press conference from the census to see what we're going to say to turn it right back around at 3. And that involves, a whole team of people of my team getting talking points together, data, getting the data from the census to throw it into people's talking points, and then getting on Zoom where we had over 40 media outlets on, including CNN. So, there's a lot going on, and you as I'm sure the others will say, when it comes to press conferences. And, you always want to make sure that everything looks great. And so that was today. Tomorrow is a session day. I'll be in Springfield and we don't really know what to expect. But last week, for example, was third reading deadline week for bills, which means we had to get as many bills as we could read on the floor for a third time in order for them to even be considered passed into the other chamber. So I think Thursday we were in session from 11 a.m. to midnight, just passing bills after bills. And so it's crazy. But June 15th, I don't know, we'll probably be hanging out, just doing nothing. So it's really all over the place.
And now I have to top both of you. I roll out of bed at 8:55 and start my day shortly at 9. No. It's interesting. It's interesting. I'm so glad you brought up the census data because that really throws an interesting path into the next few months with the state redrawing state house maps, state senate maps, US house maps. The city council also redraws their maps too with this census data. So it's a once in a decade opportunity to redraw maps that is usually done politically to benefit a lot of different political factions. So that, if you're interested in public affairs, is something really to take a look at because it's going to be very interesting, especially because in the last few years, we've seen various different political powerhouses come out of power and various new ones rise to power. So it'll be a redistricting that has not been seen in Illinois and Chicago before. So if you're interested in that stuff, I'd keep an eye on that in the news cycle. But I guess I can bring up two different things that have happened previously this summer that have kind of exhibited what it's like working virtually in public affairs. The first was during this past summer, Lincoln Park had some of the highest, and just so you know, the 43rd Ward, which I work for, is Lincoln Park. So it has DePaul, the Gold Coast, and Old Town. So a very wealthy white area of Chicago. And it had some of the highest positivity rates in the city of Chicago for COVID. And there are various reasons for that. However, the only people that died in the 43rd Ward from COVID were folks who lived in assisted living facilities or long-term care facilities. But the fact remains that the positivity rate was alarmingly high. And that has to do with a lot of things. The first was that there was next to no compliance in terms of people living in the area with mask wearing. I'm sure as DePaul students, I'm not sure how many of you live in Lincoln Park, but Oz Park is a beautiful park that people go to and not many wear masks at all. When you're walking down the street, people are not wearing masks. So we actually had community members come to us and ask to organize a campaign that would encourage folks on the hyper local levels to start wearing their masks. And so we created a little bit of a campaign called Face It Lincoln Park, which was to encourage folks in all areas of life to start wearing their mask. So we had representatives from the Lincoln Park Chamber of Commerce. We had the owner of the Greenhouse Theater, so local businesses. We had a restaurant owner. We had a local school principal. The alderman spoke. So these various different factions of individual that make up a community, we had them all come speak in about a half-hour press conference to encourage folks to face at Lincoln Park, wear your masks. We are not immune from this disease just because we have access to good health care and because not as many people are dying in our community. So that was put together in about 3 days, which was a very heavy lift to get that off the ground. And I'm sure my colleagues can relate to this, that when you're doing a press conference, it can be very difficult to get people to stay in the allotted amount of time that you have set aside for them. So as a staffer, if you say, we only want you to speak for 1 to 2 minutes, could you please keep it in that? You should really allot for about 5 to 10 minutes of time that they're going to speak. Everybody is going to go over. So as somebody who is very much on time management and likes to keep things concise, that was a big worry of mine. And so we allotted a half hour We invited various to come view, and we had a really good turnout. Block Club Chicago wrote an article on it. And after that, we actually did start to see a little bit more compliance in wearing masks and people going to local businesses and wearing masks. And that was all pulled off in about a 3-day period of time, which, you know, I still have some hair on my head from that, but it was incredibly stressful, especially when people's lives are on the line. And then the other one was this past summer as well. We saw an increase pretty rapidly in vehicular hijackings in the 18th and 19th district, which cover the Lincoln Park area. And we usually do a public safety forum, which invites the commanders of the 18th and 19th district, as well as the CAP's office, to come speak. But we did a special community forum on what the city was doing to help folks to decrease the amount of vehicular hijackings throughout the city of Chicago. So representatives from Kim Fox's office, who's the Cook County State's Attorney, came. Representatives from CPD, including the head of the Vehicular Hijacking Task Force, a man named, I think Brendan Dinahan is his name. I can't remember his title, unfortunately. And we had about 1,100 people register for that, which was the largest turnout for an event we've ever had. And after that, we saw, due to the task force and the work of the Chicago Police Department and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, a pretty rapid decrease in the amount of vehicular hijacking. So there were 6 in the first few months from January until we held this forum in September. And since September, we've only had 1 vehicular hijacking after that. So really, the kind of stuff that goes on is stuff that we try to help people's lives. And it's often a really quick turnaround. As my colleagues were talking about, it goes on a day-to-day basis. But it's always very beneficial to see the amount of change that can happen because of it.
Yeah, I feel like nowadays building trust within our local communities is going to be so much more challenging with everything going on. And so that brings into a good segue. Joanna, I'm gonna give it to you because we have a couple like journalism related questions, but also your relationship with the media and, you know, getting people to actually participate. So Joanna, I'll let you ask what you had.
Yeah, that was a perfect segue, actually. And I do just want to reiterate, we'll get to questions in a little bit, but feel free to type them now or send them to me and Natalie. We encourage commentary here. So the first question I have for you panelists is, what can reporters do to establish trust with public officials or their PR people, keeping in mind not to abandon their journalistic integrity?
So speaking on the CPD side, what can a reporter do to establish trust with a public official? I would say be fair and accurate. And I think always what goes a long way is to provide honestly, and on our side, we encourage transparency, you know, as skeptical as folks may be about that. But I think also it's appreciated when the government body has an opportunity to weigh in on a story as well, not just confirm facts or you know, validate facts or events, but you know, being given an opportunity to weigh in and see that stories are balanced with sources. So I would say what can go a long way is providing that government official or spokesperson an opportunity to provide a statement or weigh in on a particular topic. I think along with that is just being transparent with the cover on the other side as well, transparency around what the story will look like. So often, you know, an offer from a reporter to weigh in on something, just want to make sure, you know, your voices are heard, but really it's on the back end. And what we see often in coverage is that we're given an opportunity to comment, but 4/5 of the story is really, it's a big imbalance of perspectives on the story, and the government side only comes in at the very bottom to get the official statement. So I think it's always appreciated when we're given the opportunity to weigh in, and when we see that reflected in coverage as well.
I couldn't agree more with everything Luis said. Transparency and just honesty right off the bat media and getting to know them, but at the same time, hey, if you're looking to do a hit piece on my boss, just tell me. And, I'll be honest with you. I'll be straight with you. I'm working for the Republican Party in Illinois in a blue state. Like, trust me, this is half my job. So, I've developed a really, really good relationship with a lot of media outlets that I'm sure my peers here have as well. And you just kind of work with them and just be honest with me. Hey, what's your story going to be about? I'll do what I can to help you. If I can't answer questions, I'm just going to tell them, hey, you know what? We're not commenting on that, or we're not going down that road, because I think that, being honest with them as opposed to ignoring them, which I think is like the biggest mistake people on my side do, which they're like, don't answer that. It's going to be a bad story. And I was like, well, it's going to be a bad story. Don't you think you want your side in there explaining what your involvement was, or what you had to say? So I'm a huge proponent of always responding to media outlets. I think that's the only way that, the media will trust us, and, vice versa. And so that's why I do think just honesty on both ends is huge, and goes a really long way in our field.
And I think media keeps government honest, and government keeps media in business, quite frankly, too. So it is a give and take relationship. I'll defer to my colleagues here on their experience building relationships with reporters, but I will also say, provide as much detail as you can. So if you need something by a certain time, make sure to include that right away. As easy as you can make it for a public official or a government agency to respond and give you the most accurate information they can will just set you head worlds apart. So make sure to include all that stuff too.
I will say one thing I thought of as we were speaking was maybe one easy way to maybe lose some equity and trust. One thing that it's a pet peeve is when, let's say, for example, our office gets an email at 3:30 and says, hey, we're working on a story on X, Y, and Z. We spoke with A, B, and C. Do you want to weigh in? The story's going up at 4 o'clock. It's like, you guys already wrote your story. Like, you already know what the story is going to be, so now we're just, you're just sliding us in. So I think, again, that ties back to transparency and fairness, keeping both sides fair. So that's one way to lose trust with an entity, government body.
And, going off of that, half of my job, and maybe for you too as well, Luis, is, monitoring the media and calling reporters after stories post saying, why the hell didn't you call us? This person needs to be responding in here. Or sometimes, like Luis said, there's a whole story like attacking like everybody. And then at the bottom is that person's response. And then I have to call an editor and say, hey, that's not fair. His response has to be up towards the top, because most readers, if it's a long story, are like glancing at the top headlines and first few paragraphs. And if they're interested, they keep reading. If they're not, they don't. And it's not fair for our side, like whoever the person under attack is, to not get to be higher up in the story, so somebody can really, so it can truly be a fair story. So, that is a lot of my job, is every morning, scanning all the stories that are coming out about our members and, seeing, hey, do I have to call anybody, fix anything? Or obviously there's a whole world of killing stories, but I'm sure you guys don't want to hear about that.
We might want to if we have time later on, but I love what you all touched on, how it's really like this reciprocal relationship, because I can't tell you how many horror stories I hear about, like, oh, don't bother contacting, so-and-so's office, their PR person won't give you anything, or, whatnot. And it's like, we're all people too, and we're all trying to do our job. So I love that, you all touched on transparency on both ends. We are going to open up for questions. So feel free to send them our way. While we're waiting for one, I'll continue with another journalism related question. Eleni, I feel like you can probably bust out your notes for this one. Okay. But it's basically, how would I transition a degree or a background in journalism into a career working in public affairs or into the public sector if, say, we don't have Carol Marine, internship as an option, but like, how do you do that in the real world?
transitioning from journalism into public affairs is you're going from a non-biased reporting and PR to super biased reporting and PR that you're trying to get messaging out there. So that was my hardest transition, was when I first had to start writing press releases. And like my boss at the time was confused. She's like, why is this written so blah? We need to like hammer home the point that this bill is bullshit because of blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, you know, and so that took probably at least a year for me to get really comfortable in understanding that, hey, I'm now on the other side of this, where I need to sell my story, whatever the story is, whoever the elected official is. And so that was like the first point that I would make about transitioning over, is to understand that you also have to, especially if you're coming into the public affairs world of government, and if you're working for elected officials, I mean, you really have to, you don't have to agree with your boss or whoever you work for, like on every issue, but the core principle is you kind of have to be there because you have to be out there advocating for this person. And so for me, as you can imagine, in the Republican caucus, that's difficult. We have members on all spectrums. Some I agree with on certain issues, some I don't, but my boss, Leader Durkin, is like one of the best people I've ever met. And he honestly is just a genuine person that is always willing to work with anyone on any party, any office. He's always looking for a solution. And I think that to me is like what really has driven me to love working for him. And he's also like guided our entire caucus in that same direction. And so that's really been nice to be a part of it. And I would say one thing I wrote down here to mention, which I bet my peers will agree, the best part of being in public affairs is being part of a solution. So, you know, you work on bills, policies that are, you watch them change, just like Luis said with the consent decree. Like you see the things that you're doing. You are passing, you write a bill and watch it go through committee and then eventually pass through the chamber. And it's just really, really cool to be a part of that because, you know, you're watching what you're doing make a difference. And I did a lot of that actually at the sheriff's office. I worked inside the Cook County Jail at the time for like 2.5 years, which was fun. And, but one of the things was like a lot of mental health initiatives. At the time, Rahm Emanuel had closed like 50% of the mental health centers in the city. And basically the jail had become the largest mental health hospital in the nation. And we'd be interviewing inmates when they're coming in and they're like, yeah, I just committed a crime to come in here so I can get my meds because I can't get them anywhere else. And so just watching and then, you know, talking to then our legislators that we work with and getting bills written. I mean, the mental health crisis is far, far, far from over. But just watching you be a part of this is just really an amazing experience. And that is why I personally love being in this field.
So I am not a journalist, but from the agency sector and even in CPD, people who have professional journalism experience are a hot commodity, very sought after. In both sides, it's your knowledge of the newsroom, how the news cycle works, those relationships that you have. We have on my team, a former field producer for CBS 2 Chicago. And she knows all the producers at all the networks. And if we ever need to book something really quickly or ensure something gets in or anything like that, her experience, she's able to pick up a phone quickly. She knows, she just knows the mechanics and ins and outs of how the newsrooms work. And also I've seen journalists can provide strategic counsel on how certain, you know, communication strategies can be received. You know, again, like Elena said, a very flowery, you know, message heavy pitch. Somebody with a journalism background can give that, and I could give the same counsel. My peer who's a former journalist will give the same counsel. That journalist often will have more weight with their opinion just because of their experience, and they know how the newsrooms work. And, you know, and that's very, very fair. I would trust someone who's worked in a newsroom, who has that experience, and I would trust what they would have to say when it comes to a communication strategy.
And I just want to, sorry, I know we've answered this question like 10 times already, and sorry, Mckay, but I just want to say totally right. Just I know there's like a four is cutting it for TV stations. And so I'm like, 3:00, we're going on. And our members were like, well, Jesus, can we just have like 30 extra minutes so we can digest the info? And I was like, no, we literally can't. It has to happen at 3. There is no ands or buts about it because we have to capture the news cycle. And, that's the big thing about this is, you always want to respond within the news cycle. And that's what Louise was saying when, it's kind of unfair when you get an email at like 3:30 saying, hey, my deadline's at 4. Can you get me a statement? That's not the way things should roll. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there.
I'll also say on the broader scale, people with a journalism degree know how to write, and they also know how to look at the big picture. If you want to go into policy, a lot of what you're doing is dissecting lengthy, boring documents like a budget or a policy proposal and all that stuff, and putting it into succinct explanations of what that actually says. And I can't think of more prepared people than people who have studied journalists to take something like that and make it readable for your politicians, even the ones that aren't always interested in that specific policy that you're pitching at that time. With the Committee on Ethics and Government Oversight, we work with the Office of the Inspector General. And the Inspector General issues audit reports, which are usually issued either by a complaint by somebody who works in a specific department in the city of Chicago, or they just go through routine reviews of various different departments. So, for example, there have been ones on lobbying government officials and things like that, which usually get the biggest headlines. One of the most recent ones that we actually did a joint hearing with the Committee on Environmental Protection was a report detailing basically the failure of the city of Chicago's recycling program in buildings with 5 or more units. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the city of Chicago is one of the worst cities in the country for recycling, which is entirely depressing. And it's an issue that Alderman Smith cares very deeply about. So we were able to host a hearing to break down basically what this 80 to 90 page report said and what can be done to fix it, which oftentimes you'll see this huge issue and figure out that very small changes can help figure out what the problem is and how they can fix it. So in this case, it was hiring more people to enforce existing recycling legislation so that buildings who have hired private vendors start to actually get the services that they're paying for. Another one is when the Committee on Ethics and Government Oversight first started, we passed legislation that you would think would be kind of common sense, which was restrictions on lobbying. So it was people who hold government positions in Cook County cannot lobby City of Chicago aldermen or employees or things like that, which you would assume would already be a piece of legislation. But as we've seen over the few years, many government officials have been indicted for this very same thing because they've been breaking existing legislations. So we were able to pass this reform, which really only affected a few folks in the city of Chicago, and they had to decide whether or not they wanted to continue lobbying, which is a very lucrative business, or hold their existing public-facing job, so elected as a city council person in Calumet City or something like that. So it's not always interesting, but I think journalism can be very beneficial to breaking down these policies and making it palatable in a sense.
And I just want to piggyback on that really quick. We've been trying to pass a bill in the state legislature for the last 2 years to ban legislators from being lobbyists. And it's like the most common sense, like most reporters, when I talk to, they're like, wait, legislators can be lobbyists? And still, it just remains dead. It just sits in the Rules Committee. And, we have a new speaker now. I'm sure you guys are aware of who Mike Madigan was and still is, really. And now he's gone. And we were kind of hoping that maybe we would see some movement, and we haven't seen it yet. So we're just hoping that we can get some common sense ethics reform bills passed in Springfield, because it is beyond long overdue.
respectful of everybody's time. So I just want to ask if we have time to maybe throw in one audience question. Is everybody okay? Or okay. Perfect. Also, Mckay, I love how you threw journalists' ability to like wad through boring documents as a skill. That's awesome. So
Put
we
it
have,
on your resume. It's a transferable skill in our industry.
that's awesome. So a question from Holly regarding campaigning in politics and for the CPD. Has it been harder to gain audiences through Zoom and online calls, or has there been some kind of silver lining with hosting these virtual events?
For me personally, COVID was not the best thing that ever happened, but Zoom was the best thing that ever happened to us because, everyone is able to access Zoom. So if you're having a press conference physically in person somewhere, you're limiting your ability to get every reporter there, especially, I can't count the number of times pre-COVID when I'd have to cancel a press conference like, hey, CPD is breaking news right now. We got to cut our press conference because no chance anybody cares what we're doing compared to CPD or any other big news that's happening. And so when you have this opportunity of Zoom now, people might not be able to tune in at that time, but they'll tune in afterwards. You can send them the link, you can record it. And we've seen our coverage, I can't explain to you, multiply across the state. And, just today we had CNN logged into our Zoom. It's like, what? How is that happening? But it's really just having this access to just everyone, and everyone else having the access to us is awesome. And so to me, Zoom has been great for us.
On the CPD side, especially for the campaign that I mentioned, so it's made things so much easier to ensuring that we're reaching those audiences that are, underrepresented and most likely to be impacted by a police policy. So for example, it's so much more difficult to ask someone from Chatham or Englewood or Austin to come to where we are, especially during COVID, right? Or bringing together someone from the 43rd Ward together with someone from the 2nd Ward. But Zoom and teleconferencing has made that possible for one body like CPD to bring together different kinds of folks. And it's one room now where opinions and perspectives and experiences from across, North, South, and West are being shared. And now we can pull that, make things so efficient to be reflected in our strategy and our campaign, and it can inform us. So again, and it makes logistics so much easier now. I think nothing beats face-to-face interaction, right? I think when you have, once we start having our beat meetings and CAPS meetings and ward meetings on a regular basis, nothing beats face-to-face interaction. But in the meantime, it has eased things as far as logistics go, and being able to bring people to, geography hasn't been as much as a challenge, because now, regardless of where you are, there still may be a technological challenge. But those with so that exists, and equity and access to the internet, but it has made things easier to bring folks together from all sides of the city.
I agree 100%. And I would bet that elements of Zoom in community meetings and things like that will be here to stay, because we've actually seen a far higher turnout in terms of people directly in our community coming to our events, because it's so much easier to tune into something when you can sit in your own living room and watch. And then also leaving is so easy too. So people will come in, stay for 10 minutes. If they're not interested, they can leave, and you're still in your living room throughout the entire process. And a big part of what we do as well is zoning decisions, infrastructure, things like that. And it makes the logistics, as you said, so much easier. You don't have to worry about finding a room with a specific capacity. You don't have to worry about whether or not the microphones are going to be working really well. All those little details, Zoom has actually made a lot of elements of community outreach a lot easier. So that is about the only good thing that came out of this.
Yeah, and just the fact that we're able to connect with all of you, we have been so appreciative of the time that you guys took out to meet with us today. I think this is such, it's an industry not for the faint of heart, but it's definitely up and coming, and a lot of passionate and dedicated professionals, even you three. It's definitely a job that needs to be done, and we really appreciate all that you do for Chicago and Illinois. And I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to meet with us again. But yeah, we hope you have a wonderful evening. It was nice to see you, Mckay and Luis, and nice to meet you, Eleni. So thank you all. And yeah, we'll close out. That's all we have. So we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel. And then I'm sure you guys can all connect on LinkedIn if you have more questions for them as well. So thank you all.
Natalie, can I send you my email in case anybody is
Yes.
interested
Feel
in an
free.
internship or anything?
Yeah, and I have your emails too, so we can post that in our newsletter as well if you are all okay with that.
Perfect.
Great.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank
It was great.
you.
Thank you. This
Have
was
a good
great.
evening.
Is eBoard staying after?
Up to you, Juliet.